In the vast expanse of the galaxy, where 1,000 species have risen and fallen, where empires spanning light years have crumbled to dust, there exists a universal truth that every sentient being learns: respect the impossible. But what happens when a young species, barely 3 centuries into space travel, looks at the impossible and simply says, "Hold my drink"? The Galactic Council had protocols for everything. Protocols for first contact, protocols for trade disputes, protocols for planetary evacuation. What they didn't have was a protocol for the day humans would rewrite the fundamental laws of physics itself, armed with nothing but stubborn determination and an alarming lack of respect for the word impossible. This is the story of the day the galaxy learned why humans have a saying: when someone tells you to stand back, you might want to listen. We're about to do something really stupid or really brilliant. Sometimes both. The difference between those two things, as it turns out, is often just a matter of perspective and success. Welcome to the day humanity taught the universe that sometimes the most dangerous words in any language are "watch this." Ambassador Kethvar's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of deep contemplation among her people as she stared at the holographic display floating before the emergency session of the Galactic Council. The data stream showed nothing but chaos. Red warning indicators cascading across multiple star systems, gravitational anomalies that shouldn't exist, and, most disturbing of all, the complete silence from the Zirian Collective's home system. The Council Chamber, a marvel of crystalline architecture that had stood for 12,000 years, hummed with the nervous energy of 200 species trying to comprehend the incomprehensible. Representatives from across the galaxy filled the floating platforms that orbited the central discussion sphere, their varied forms creating a tapestry of evolution's countless experiments. Some breathed methane, others required intense radiation to survive, and a few existed as pure energy contained within specialized suits. Despite their differences, they all shared one thing today: complete and utter bewilderment. "The readings make no sense," announced Thorak Prime, the crystalline being who served as the Council's chief science advisor. His form sparkled with frustrated energy as data streams flowed through his translucent body. "The gravitational distortions are increasing exponentially. At this rate, the entire Zirian system will collapse into a black hole within 72 standard hours." The Zirian Collective had been one of the galaxy's oldest civilizations, masters of quantum manipulation and temporal mechanics. Their home system consisted of 17 planets, each one a testament to their advanced technology. They had been working on something called the Universal Constant Project, an attempt to create a stable pocket dimension that could serve as a refuge for their entire species. The project had been deemed theoretically impossible by every major scientific institution in the galaxy. Now it seemed they had proven the scientists right, but in the worst possible way. Elder Zephyrian of the Cosmic Tribunal raised one of her 6 arms, and the chamber fell silent. Her species had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations, and their words carried the weight of millennia. "We have consulted the Archive of Impossibilities," she announced, her voice echoing strangely in the chamber's acoustic field. "There are 3 recorded instances of similar gravitational anomalies in galactic history. In each case, entire star systems were consumed. The implications hung heavy in the air. If the Zirian system collapsed, the gravitational shockwaves would destabilize neighboring systems. What had started as one species' ambitious experiment could trigger a cascade failure affecting billions of lives across dozens of worlds." Commander Vextal of the Hegemony Defense Fleet stood on his platform, his scarred carapace telling the story of countless battles. "My ships are already evacuating the outer colonies," he reported, his mechanical voice carrying undertones of urgency. "But we cannot move 17 billion Zirions and another 40 billion inhabitants from neighboring systems in 70 hours. It's mathematically impossible." "What about the synthesis protocol?" suggested Dr. Yillian, her luminescent form pulsing with desperate hope. The synthesis protocol was the galaxy's last resort, a technology that could temporarily merge multiple civilizations' resources and knowledge. It had only been used twice in recorded history, both times to prevent galactic-scale extinctions. Thorak Prime's form dimmed. The energy requirements alone would drain the power cores of 15 major worlds. Even then, We would need a breakthrough in gravitational manipulation that our best minds say cannot exist. We would need to literally rewrite the fundamental constants of reality itself. The chamber erupted in overlapping conversations as species after species offered their most advanced technologies, their most brilliant scientists, their most powerful ships. The Vorthen offered their reality-bending engines. The Nexus provided their quantum computers capable of processing the thoughts of gods. The ancient architects volunteered to sacrifice their home world's entire energy output for the cause. But even combined, it wasn't enough. The mathematics were unforgiving. That's when the soft chime of an incoming communication request cut through the chaos. Ambassador Kethvar looked at her console, and all four of her eyes widened simultaneously. The Terran Federation has requested permission to address the Assembly. A collective silence fell over the chamber. The humans were relatively new to galactic politics, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 3 centuries ago. They were known for being resilient, creative, and somewhat reckless, but their technology was primitive compared to most Council species. Their ships still used crude fusion drives, their computers were barely sentient, and their understanding of advanced physics was, by galactic standards, charmingly basic. Elder Zephyrian's ancient voice carried a note of gentle dismissal. While we appreciate the Terran Federation's offer to help, this crisis requires technologies that are beyond current human capabilities. The communication channel opened anyway, and the image of Admiral Sarah Chun appeared on the central display. She was a small woman by human standards, her dark hair streaked with gray and her brown eyes carrying the weight of someone who had seen too much. Behind her, the bridge of her ship hummed with activity as human officers worked frantically at their stations. Honorable Council members, Admiral Chun began, her voice carrying that particular human quality that other species found both endearing and slightly concerning. Absolute confidence in the face of overwhelming odds. We've been monitoring the situation in the Zirian system. We understand the gravity of the threat. Commander Vextal's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. Admiral, while your concern is noted, our greatest minds have determined that this problem requires a complete rewriting of fundamental physical laws. It is quite literally impossible. Admiral Chin nodded thoughtfully, then turned to someone off-screen. Did you hear that, Marcus? They say it's impossible. A new voice responded from somewhere on the human ship, carrying an accent that the translation systems identified as originating from Earth's former American territory. Impossible? Well, that just means nobody's figured out how to do it yet. The Admiral turned back to the Council, and something in her expression made Ambassador Kethvar's respiratory system flutter nervously. Council members, we've been working on something we call the Bootstrap Paradox Engine. It's based on a theoretical framework one of our physicists developed after reading Zirian research papers that were considered too dangerous to pursue. Thorak Prime's crystalline form brightened with what might have been scientific curiosity. The Bootstrap Paradox? That's a temporal mechanics concept. It has no application to gravitational manipulation. Well, said the off-screen human voice, now identified as Dr. Marcus Webb. That's what we thought too, until we started wondering what would happen if you could convince reality that the solution to a problem already existed, and you were just implementing it. The translation systems struggled with the concept, producing confusion among several species. Elder Zephyrian spoke carefully, her ancient wisdom grappling with what seemed like cosmic nonsense. Dr. Webb, are you suggesting that you can solve this crisis by convincing the universe that you've already solved it? More or less, came the cheerful reply. We've built a device that creates what we're calling a causal feedback loop. Essentially, we use the future solution to the problem to solve the problem in the present, which creates the future solution. It's like pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, but with space-time. The silence that followed was so complete that the chamber's environmental systems seemed loud by comparison. Finally, Ambassador Kethvar found her voice. Dr. Webb, what you're describing violates approximately 17 fundamental laws of physics. 18, actually, Dr. Webb corrected with audible enthusiasm. We counted. But here's the thing, and this is important. Laws are just descriptions of what we think reality can do. They're not actually rules that reality follows. Reality doesn't read the physics textbooks. Admiral Chun stepped forward, and her expression grew serious. Council members, I know how this sounds. I know our species is young, and our technology is primitive by your standards. But 17 billion Zirions are going to die if we don't try something. And sometimes the solutions to impossible problems come from people who don't know enough to realize they're impossible. Commander Vextal's tactical displays showed the continuing degradation of the Zirian system. Whole planets were beginning to show stress fractures as gravitational tides beyond imagining tore at their surfaces. Admiral Chun, even if your theoretical framework had merit, which our best scientists assure me it does not, the energy requirements for any intervention would be astronomical. That's why we need your help, Admiral Chun replied. We can't power this thing with human technology. We need the combined output of the synthesis protocol, channeled through our bootstrap engine. Dr. Yilian's luminescent form pulsed with agitation. You're asking us to commit the resources of 15 worlds to power a device based on a theory that contradicts everything we know about reality. Yes, Admiral Chun said simply. That's exactly what we're asking. The chamber erupted in debate. Some species called for an immediate vote to reject the human proposal. Others argued that desperate times called for desperate measures. The mathematical projections continued their grim countdown, 68 hours until total system collapse. In the midst of the chaos, a new voice cut through the noise. It belonged to Zirian Prime Consciousness HFY, speaking from the doomed system itself. The Zirions communicated through quantum entanglement of their neural networks, making their voice seem to come from everywhere at once. We have nothing left to lose, the collective voice said, carrying the weight of a civilization facing extinction. Our greatest achievement was an attempt to transcend the limitations of conventional physics. If we must die, perhaps it is fitting that our salvation should come from those willing to attempt the impossible. Elder Zephyrian's 6 arms moved in a pattern that indicated deep consideration. The humans are asking us to bet everything on a paradox. Sometimes, Admiral Chun said quietly, the only way to solve an impossible problem is to stand back and do something impossible in return. Ambassador Kethvar looked around the chamber at the representatives of 200 civilizations, all of them faced with the same terrible choice. In 68 hours, they would either witness the salvation of the Zirian system through means that defied all known science, or they would watch as one of the galaxy's greatest civilizations vanished into the hungry darkness of a black hole. The vote, when it came, was closer than anyone had expected. By a margin of exactly 3 votes. The number of abstentions from species that existed in multiple dimensions and considered the entire debate somewhat quaint. The Galactic Council agreed to attempt the impossible. As the session ended and the various ambassadors began the complex process of organizing galactic resources for humanity's bootstrap paradox engine, Ambassador Kethvar found herself staring at Admiral Chen's image as it faded from the display. The human woman had looked so confident, so certain that her impossible solution would work. But as Kethvar's 4 eyes tracked the latest gravitational readings from a Zirian system, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were all about to witness either the greatest triumph in galactic history or the most spectacular failure ever recorded. Somewhere in the depths of space, human ships were already moving toward the crisis, carrying with them a device that shouldn't work, powered by theories that couldn't be true, designed to save a civilization through means that defied the fundamental nature of reality itself. The countdown had begun. In 68 hours, the galaxy would learn whether the impossible was simply another word for not yet attempted, or whether some barriers were never meant to be crossed. But, knowing humans, Ambassador Kethvar thought as she prepared her final reports, they would find out in the most dramatic way possible. The human ship Prometheus, rising hung in space like a defiant middle finger pointed at the laws of physics themselves. To the alien observers gathering around the Zirian system, it looked impossibly primitive, a crude assemblage of metal and composites that belonged in a museum, not at the center of the galaxy's most ambitious rescue attempt. Its fusion engines glowed with simple orange fire, instead of the elegant plasma cascades favored by more advanced civilizations. Its hull bore the scars of countless battles and repairs, giving it the appearance of a veteran warrior rather than a cutting-edge research vessel. But appearances, as Dr. Marcus Webb was fond of saying, were just another thing that reality used to fool people into thinking they understood how things worked. Inside the ship's main laboratory, Webb himself stood before what could only be described as organized chaos. The bootstrap paradox engine occupied the central chamber, a bewildering array of crystalline matrices, quantum processors, and temporal field generators that seemed to have been assembled by someone who had read too many physics papers and not enough safety manuals. Cables snaked across the floor in patterns that hurt to look at directly, connecting components that had never been designed to work together. Status report. Admiral Chun called as she entered the lab, followed by a small army of technicians and observers from a dozen different species. The alien scientists had arrived despite their government's official skepticism, driven by the kind of morbid curiosity that made people slow down to stare at traffic accidents. Webb looked up from a console that was displaying equations in 17 different mathematical languages, including several that weren't technically supposed to exist. His hair was disheveled, his uniform rumpled, and his eyes had the slightly manic gleam of someone who had been drinking coffee and rewriting the fundamental constants of reality for the past 36 hours. "Well," he said, gesturing at the engine with the kind of proud satisfaction usually reserved for parents showing off their children's finger paintings. "The good news is that it definitely violates physics. The bad news is that it violates physics in ways we didn't expect." Dr. Scythen Ka, the Vorthan representative whose species had mastered reality-bending technologies millennia ago, approached one of the temporal field generators with obvious fascination. Her energy form shimmered as she tried to comprehend what she was seeing. "Dr. Webb, these field harmonics should create a causality cascade that tears apart local space-time. How is this chamber still intact?" "Ah," Webb said, brightening like a teacher whose student had finally asked the right question. "See, that's where it gets interesting. The causality cascade is happening, but we've convinced it that it already didn't happen, so it's happening in reverse, which means it's actually stabilizing itself." The translation systems struggled with that explanation for several seconds before giving up and simply marking the entire statement as paradoxical nonsense. Ambassador Kethvar, who had arrived aboard the first transport ship despite having no scientific background whatsoever, found herself staring at a display screen that showed what appeared to be a graph of impossible things. "Dr. Webb, in language that doesn't require advanced degrees in temporal mechanics, could you explain what this device is supposed to do?" Webb paused, then walked over to a whiteboard that was covered in equations so complex they seemed to move when viewed peripherally. He erased a section and began drawing what looked like a very simple diagram of 2 points connected by an arrow. "Okay," he said, "imagine that the Zirian system is currently at point A, which is about to become a black hole. And we want it to be at point B, which is not a black hole. Normally, you need to figure out how to get from A to B using known physics, which everyone agrees is impossible." He drew a circular arrow that somehow connected the 2 points by going around something that wasn't visible on the diagram. "The bootstrap engine works by assuming that we already successfully got from A to B, and then using that success to generate the conditions necessary to get from A to B. It's like, imagine you need to jump over a wall, but the wall is too high. So instead, you stand on the other side of the wall and reach back in time to pull yourself over." Dr. Alox, whose crystalline form had been analyzing the engine's quantum resonance patterns, suddenly made a sound like breaking glass. "Dr. Webb, what you've described is a closed temporal loop. The energy requirements to maintain such a paradox would require the output of a star." "Yeah, that's why we need the synthesis protocol," Webb agreed cheerfully. "We need to borrow a star's worth of energy, use it to solve the problem, and then return the energy once the problem is solved and we don't need it anymore." Admiral Chun cleared her throat. "Speaking of the synthesis protocol, how are the preparations going?" Commander Vextal's voice crackled through the communication system from his command ship. "All participating worlds have confirmed their readiness to transfer power through the quantum tunnel network. The Hegemony Defense Fleet has established containment field around the entire operation zone. If this goes wrong, we want to limit the damage to one star system." "Just one?" Webb asked with interest. "That's optimistic. Our calculations suggest that if the bootstrap engine fails catastrophically, it could potentially unravel the local cluster's gravitational matrix. We might lose about 30 systems." The silence that followed was the kind of profound quiet that usually preceded either enlightenment or total panic. Elder Zephyrian's voice, when it came through the communication channel, carried the weight of someone who had seen civilizations rise and fall and was now contemplating watching physics itself have a nervous breakdown. "Dr. Webb," she said carefully, "are you telling us that your solution to saving the Zirian system might accidentally destroy 30 other star systems?" "Well," Webb replied thoughtfully, the probability matrices are pretty unclear on that point. It's more like there's a chance that attempting to fix local reality might cause reality in general to notice that it's been making some inconsistent choices lately and decide to sort everything out all at once. Dr. Thorak Prime's crystalline form flickered with what might have been despair. Dr. Webb, you're describing a scenario where the universe performs a factory reset on local physics. That's actually a pretty good analogy, Webb agreed, though it's more like convincing the universe to update its operating system while it's running. Sure, there's a chance everything crashes, but most of the time it works fine, and you get better performance afterward. The alien scientists began what could only be described as a very polite panic. Conversations broke out in a dozen different languages as various species tried to comprehend the implications of what they had agreed to support. The Nexus representative attempted to calculate probability matrices for universal operating system failures. The architect delegate started designing emergency reality anchors. The Cosmic Tribunal's observer began composing what appeared to be a will. Admiral Chun watched the chaos with the calm expression of someone who had commanded human crews for decades and was therefore accustomed to watching people do impossible things with insufficient information and excessive confidence. Dr. Webb, she said quietly, I need an honest assessment. What are our actual chances of success? Webb considered the question seriously, which somehow made everything worse. Well, Admiral, the thing about bootstrap paradoxes is that they either work perfectly or they fail in ways that redefine what failure means. So our chances of success are either 100% or negative infinity%, with no middle ground. And which do you think it will be? I have absolutely no idea, Webb admitted with frightening honesty. But here's what I do know. The Xerian system is definitely going to be destroyed if we don't try. So even if our attempt at salvation has only a small chance of working and a significant chance of making everything worse, we're still mathematically obligated to try. Through the ship's communication system, they could hear updates from across the galaxy as the largest cooperative effort in galactic history took shape. The Vorthan had begun channeling energy from their reality-bending engines into the quantum tunnel network. The Nexus computers were calculating temporal field harmonics in real time. The ancient architects were providing structural stability to space-time itself, essentially acting as cosmic scaffolding to keep reality from collapsing while the humans performed surgery on it. From the Xerian system itself, Prime Consciousness Othel YSS continued to provide updates on their civilization's final hours. Their 17 worlds were showing increasingly severe gravitational distortions. 3 of the outer planets had already begun breaking apart, their fragments spiraling inward toward the growing anomaly at the system's heart. The Xerions had evacuated their populations to massive space habitats, but even those were showing structural stress as space-time itself twisted around them. Prometheus rising, came the voice of Xerian Prime Consciousness. We are detecting unusual energy readings from your vessel. Are you beginning your attempt? Not yet, Admiral Chen replied. Dr. Webb, how much longer until we're ready? Webb was now surrounded by holographic displays showing the incoming power feeds from across the galaxy. The combined energy output of 15 major worlds was being channeled through quantum tunnels that stretched across light years, all of it converging on his impossible engine. The numbers were so large that the display systems had given up using scientific notation and were simply showing them as really big and getting bigger. Admiral, we're approaching the threshold energy levels now. Once we begin, the process is irreversible. The bootstrap engine will either solve the problem or... He gestured vaguely at displays showing what appeared to be predictions for the local behavior of reality during a control breakdown. Or we accidentally convinced the universe to divide by 0. Dr. Scythen-Ka observed with what might have been admiration or terror. That's actually not entirely inaccurate, Webb admitted. Admiral Chen looked around the laboratory at the assembled representatives of galactic civilization, all of them watching humanity prepare to attempt something that every rational analysis said was impossible. She thought about the 17 billion Xerions whose lives hung in the balance, about the trillions of other beings who would be affected if this attempt failed catastrophically, and about the simple fact that someone had to try. Dr. Webb, she said, initialize the bootstrap paradox engine. Admiral, Webb replied, his hands already moving across the control interfaces, I want to know for the record that what we're about to do violates so many fundamental principles that I'm not entirely sure we should technically be able to think about it let alone actually do it. Noted, Admiral Chen said calmly. Proceed. The engine began to hum, a sound that somehow seemed to come from directions that didn't exist. The assembled alien scientists backed away from the device as energy readings climbed toward levels that their instruments insisted were impossible. Reality itself seemed to hold its breath as the humans prepared to ask it to perform the ultimate favor. And in the doomed Xerian system, 17 billion beings watched the stars and waited to learn whether salvation would come from the impossible being proven wrong or from impossibility itself being redefined. The countdown showed 32 hours remaining until total system collapse. But as the bootstrap paradox engine reached full power, time itself became just another variable that humans were about to start editing. Here we go, Dr. Webb announced cheerfully. Everyone might want to stand back. We're about to do something really stupid. The galaxy held its breath and waited to see if stupid and brilliant were once again the same thing. The moment Dr. Webb activated the bootstrap paradox engine, every sensitive instrument within 50 light-years registered what could only be described as reality, having second thoughts about its fundamental operating principles. On board the observation ships, alien scientists watched their displays show readings that their instruments insisted couldn't exist. Gravitational waves that propagated backward through time. Energy signatures that existed in negative dimensions. Quantum states that were somehow simultaneously collapsed and superimposed while also being something entirely outside the framework of quantum mechanics altogether. Dr. Alox, whose crystalline form had been designed to analyze complex energy patterns, made a sound like wind chimes caught in a hurricane. The temporal field is establishing coherence, she announced, though her voice carried the tone of someone reporting that water had decided to flow upward. The paradox engine it's actually working. Inside the Prometheus Rising, Dr. Webb stood before his impossible creation as it came to full power. The bootstrap engine now resembled less a machine and more a window into the kind of mathematics that drove philosophers to drink. Streams of energy flowed through pathways that seemed to exist in more dimensions than local space-time technically supported. The air itself seemed to shimmer with probability. Energy input from the synthesis protocol is steady, reported Lieutenant Sarah Kim from her station. Though I'm getting readings that suggest we're somehow drawing power from sources that include the concept of electricity and next Tuesday. That's normal, Webb called back absently, his attention focused on a display that was showing the current status of causality within the Xerian system. According to his instruments, the system was simultaneously collapsing into a black hole and not collapsing into a black hole, with the contradiction being maintained by what the computer helpfully labeled as aggressive paradox management. Admiral Chun stood beside him, watching the impossible numbers scroll across the screens. Her expression remained calm, but her hands were clasped tightly behind her back, a sign that she was either maintaining military discipline or preparing to grab the nearest emergency controls if reality decided to file a complaint about what they were doing to it. Status report, Dr. Webb, she said, her voice carrying across the laboratory to where alien scientists were frantically taking notes on phenomena that their respective civilizations' physics textbooks insisted were impossible. Well, Admiral, Webb replied, adjusting controls that were labeled with terms like temporal coherence and causality inversion coefficient. The good news is that we've successfully convinced the universe that the Xerian system collapse already didn't happen. The bad news is that the universe is now asking some pointed questions about what exactly we think we're doing. From the communication array came the voice of Xerian Prime, Consciousness Author YSS, carrying a note of wonder that translated across species barriers. Unknown effects detected throughout our system. The gravitational anomalies are changing. We are detecting impossible readings. On the main display, real-time images from the Xerian system showed something that made several alien observers question whether they were experiencing hallucinations or revelations. The 17 planets, which had been showing severe stress fractures from impossible gravitational tides, were beginning to stabilize. But they weren't simply returning to their original positions. They were moving to new configurations that somehow made more sense than what had been there before. Dr. Webb called Dr. Scythen Ka, her energy form flickering with excitement. The gravitational matrix is reorganizing itself. The planets are moving into arrangements that should provide better orbital stability than they had originally. Webb looked up from his controls with the expression of someone who had expected to perform miracle surgery and instead discovered that the patient was healing itself and also renovating while it was at it. Yeah, that's the thing about bootstrap paradoxes. When you convince reality that a better solution already exists, reality tends to be pretty enthusiastic about implementing improvements. Ambassador Kethvar, who had been trying to understand the technical explanations for the past hour, finally found her voice. Dr. Webb, are you telling us that your device isn't just preventing the system collapse? It's actually making the Xerian system better than it was before? That's... Webb paused to check several displays, each of which was showing increasingly impossible data. That's exactly what's happening. The Bootstrap engine told the universe that we had already solved the problem in the best possible way, so the universe is implementing the best possible solution. Elder Zephyrian's ancient voice carried across the communication network with a note of something that might have been awe. In 12,000 years of galactic civilization, we have never witnessed anything like this. The humans are not just fixing a problem, they're optimizing reality itself. But even as the Xerian system continued its impossible transformation, Dr. Webb's instruments were detecting something else. The Bootstrap Paradox engine was drawing more power than anticipated, and the energy wasn't just coming from the synthesis protocol. It was pulling energy from sources that the computer couldn't identify, sources that seemed to exist outside the normal framework of space-time. Admiral, Webb said, his voice carrying a note of concern for the first time since the operation began, we're getting some unusual readings. The engine is accessing energy sources that, well, technically speaking, I don't think they should exist. Admiral Chun moved to look over his shoulder at the displays. Is that going to be a problem? I honestly don't know, Webb admitted. The Bootstrap engine is supposed to borrow energy from the future solution to create the present solution. But it seems to be borrowing energy from multiple possible futures, including some that are pretty weird. Dr. Thorak Prime's crystalline form suddenly blazed with alarm. Dr. Webb, are you saying that your engine is drawing power from alternate timelines? That's actually a really good way to put it, Webb replied, making adjustments to controls that weren't having any visible effect on the readings. The problem is that some of these alternate timelines seem to be timelines where fundamental physics works differently. And borrowing energy from them might be. He never finished the sentence because at that moment, reality in the Xerian system did something unprecedented. It decided to experiment. The alien observers watched in fascination and horror as the space around the Xerian worlds began to shimmer. The 17 planets, now in their new, improved orbital configurations, started to exhibit properties that belonged to different versions of physics entirely. One world developed a gravity field that operated in reverse, creating floating continents that defied every known law. Another began generating energy by converting thoughts into matter. A third started experiencing time at different rates in different regions, creating zones where cause and effect operated according to rules that hadn't been invented yet. The Xerian system is becoming a reality laboratory, reported Dr. Alox, her crystalline form resonating with frequencies that hurt to hear. It's testing different versions of how physics could work. Xerian Prime Consciousness Authel spoke across the communication network, their collective voice carrying wonder and terror in equal measure. We're experiencing impossible things. Our people report that the laws of nature are changing, but not randomly. They are changing to become better, more interesting, more beautiful. Webb stared at his displays, watching as the Bootstrap engine continued to draw power from realities that weren't supposed to exist. Admiral, I think we might have accidentally created something bigger than we intended. How much bigger? Admiral Chun asked with the calm tone of someone who had commanded human crews and was therefore prepared for answers involving orders of magnitude she'd rather not think about. Well, Webb said thoughtfully, remember how I said the engine convinces reality that a solution already exists? I think reality has decided that the best solution isn't just fixing the Xerian system. The best solution is upgrading the entire local region of space-time to run on better physics. Around the laboratory, alien scientists began to panic in their species-specific ways. The Vorthan delegation started preparing emergency reality anchors. The Nexus computers began calculating the probability of universal physical constants revision. The Cosmic Tribunal's representative started composing what appeared to be a formal complaint to file with whatever cosmic authorities handled reality violations. But from the Xerian system came a different message. Prometheus Rising. This is Xerian Prime consciousness. We wish to report that our people are, we lack words. The improvements to our reality are beyond comprehension. We have gained abilities we never imagined. Our science is advancing centuries in minutes. Our artists are creating beauty that exists in dimensions we didn't know we could perceive. Admiral Chun looked at Dr. Webb, who was watching his instruments with the expression of someone who had set out to fix a leaky pipe and accidentally redesign plumbing theory. Dr. Webb, are the Xerions in danger? No, Webb replied slowly, but I'm starting to think the rest of the galaxy might be in for some interesting changes. The Bootstrap engine isn't just saving the Xerian system. It's showing reality what it could become if it stopped limiting itself to conventional physics. And, indeed, the effects were beginning to spread. Ships throughout the region were reporting instrument readings that defied analysis. Several nearby star systems were showing gravitational anomalies that seemed designed to improve interstellar travel efficiency. One system reported that its planets had spontaneously developed ecosystems that existed in mathematical harmony so perfect that looking at them induced enlightenment in most sapient species. Commander Vextal's voice crackled across the communication network with the tone of a military officer trying to maintain order while reality itself went off script. All ships maintain safe distance from the effect zone. We are detecting expansions in what can only be described as improved space-time spreading outward from the Xerian system at approximately 1 light hour per standard hour. Dr. Scythenka's energy form pulsed with what might have been excitement or terror. Dr. Webb, your Bootstrap engine isn't just solving one problem. It's teaching reality how to solve all problems. Webb nodded, making more adjustments to controls that were now labeled with terms the translation systems couldn't handle. Yeah. That's the thing about showing the universe a better way to do things. Once it sees the possibilities, it tends to get enthusiastic about implementing improvements. Elder Zephyrian's voice carried across the network with the weight of ancient wisdom confronting cosmic novelty. Dr. Webb, what have you done? Webb looked around the laboratory at the assembled representatives of galactic civilization, all of them watching humanity's impossible engine teach reality how to be better than it had been. He thought about the 17 billion Xerions who were no longer facing extinction, but instead were experiencing transcendence. He considered the growing zone of improved physics that was spreading through local space-time like a beneficial infection. Well, he said with the cheerful confidence that had become humanity's signature contribution to galactic civilization, I think we might have accidentally upgraded the universe. The good news is that everyone's going to benefit. The bad news is that we're probably going to have to update all the textbooks. As the Bootstrap Paradox engine continued its impossible work, drawing power from realities that shouldn't exist to implement solutions that couldn't work, the galaxy began to learn that sometimes the most dangerous thing you could say to humans wasn't "that's impossible." Sometimes the most dangerous thing was "that's exactly what we needed." The countdown to system collapse had become irrelevant. They were no longer racing against time to prevent a disaster. They were witnessing the birth of something unprecedented, a reality that had decided to become better than it had ever imagined it could be. And it was all because humanity had looked at an impossible problem and decided that the real issue wasn't the problem. It was the limitations that made the problem impossible in the first place. 6 hours after the Bootstrap Paradox engine had begun its impossible work, the galaxy faced a problem nobody had anticipated. Reality was getting better, and nobody knew how to handle the paperwork. The Galactic Council's emergency session had been moved to a specialized chamber designed to handle crisis management. But the chamber's designers had never imagined they'd need to accommodate a crisis that involved fundamental improvements to the nature of existence itself. Representatives from 200 species found themselves trying to draft regulations for phenomena that their languages couldn't describe and their scientists couldn't explain. Order! Order! Ambassador Kethvar called, her 4 eyes tracking the chaos that had erupted across the floating platforms. The Nexus delegation was attempting to calculate the legal implications of improved physics. The Vorthan representatives were arguing about whether reality optimization constituted a treaty violation. The ancient architects were designing emergency protocols for cosmic renovation projects that nobody had authorized. The zone of enhanced reality now encompasses 14 star systems, reported Commander Vextal, his scarred carapace reflecting the stress of trying to maintain military readiness during a physics revolution. My ships are reporting instrument readings that include dramatically improved, transcendently efficient, and in one case, mathematically beautiful to the point of causing existential crisis in artificial intelligences. Dr. Thorak Prime's crystalline form flickered with patterns that suggested he was processing information faster than ever before, which, given that his ship was now operating on improved physics, might literally be true. The effects continue to expand. We're detecting what can only be described as optimization cascades. Star systems are automatically reconfiguring themselves for maximum efficiency. Several civilizations are reporting spontaneous technological breakthroughs. One species achieved faster-than-light communication by accident while trying to make coffee. Elder Zephyrian's ancient voice carried a note of something that might have been cosmic vertigo. In 12,000 years of galactic civilization, we have faced invasions, natural disasters, and the occasional reality-threatening experiment. We have never faced a situation where the problem was that everything was getting too much better too quickly. From a human ship, Prometheus Rising, Dr. Webb's voice came through the communication network with the cheerful tone of someone who had set out to perform routine maintenance on the universe and accidentally triggered a cosmic upgrade. Council members, I want to assure you that all observed effects are operating within acceptable parameters for a bootstrap paradox scenario involving reality optimization. Dr. Webb, Ambassador Kethvar said with the careful patience of a diplomat trying to maintain sanity while reality itself got increasingly creative. Could you explain what acceptable parameters for reality optimization actually means? Well, Webb replied, and they could hear the sound of him consulting instruments that were probably displaying information in mathematical languages that hadn't existed until recently. The Bootstrap engine has successfully established a stable paradox loop where improved reality creates the conditions necessary to create improved reality. It's a self-sustaining system for universal betterment. Dr. Scythen Ka's energy form pulsed with what the Vorthin called philosophical distress. Dr. Webb, are you telling us that your device has created a universe that automatically gets better? That's actually a pretty good summary, Webb agreed. Though I should point out that better is being defined by the universe itself based on optimization algorithms we didn't program and can't control. Reality is essentially upgrading itself according to its own aesthetic preferences. The silence that followed was broken by the voice of Zirian Prime, Consciousness Author-YSS, speaking from their transformed home system. Their collective voice now carried harmonics that translation systems marked as indescribably beautiful and possibly enlightening to listen to. Council members, the Zirian Consciousness said, we wish to report on conditions within our system after the reality optimization. Our people have experienced transcendence is perhaps the closest word. We have gained access to dimensions of existence we never imagined. Our technology now operates on principles that are more elegant than anything we had conceived. Our art has become, we lack words. Perhaps most remarkably, our children are being born with capabilities that suggest the improvements to reality are not merely physical, but fundamental. Dr. Alox's crystalline form suddenly resonated with alarm frequencies. Zirian Prime, are you saying that the enhanced physics is affecting biological development? Not affecting, came a reply. Improving. Our children understand mathematics that our greatest scholars cannot comprehend. They perceive beauty in ways that bring grown adults to tears of joy. They solve problems by methods that involve concepts our language has no words for. It is as if evolution itself has been upgraded. Throughout the council chamber, representatives of various species began calculating what this might mean for their own populations. Several civilizations immediately began evacuating their border worlds, while others started filing applications to have their systems included in the next wave of reality optimization. Admiral Chen's voice cut through the growing debate with the calm authority of someone who had commanded human crews and was therefore accustomed to managing situations that got out of hand in interesting ways. Council members, I'm receiving reports from the expanding enhancement zone. The humans living in affected systems are reporting similar improvements to those described by the Zirions. Enhanced cognitive abilities, improved intuition, and what they're describing as suddenly understanding things that were always true but hidden. What kind of things? Elder Zephyrian asked, though her tone suggested she wasn't entirely sure she wanted to know. Well, Admiral Chen replied, One of our science stations reports that their researchers have solved several thousand-year-old mathematical proofs by what they describe as obvious observation. Another station has developed faster-than-light travel that works by asking space-time politely and apparently getting positive responses. Dr. Webb's voice carried a note of scientific fascination mixed with what might have been parental pride. Admiral, that's consistent with our theoretical models. The bootstrap engine doesn't just optimize physics. It optimizes the relationship between intelligence and reality. It makes the universe more comprehensible to the intelligences that live in it. Dr. Webb, Commander Vextal, said with the tone of a military officer trying to maintain strategic readiness during a cosmic revolution. What are the long-term implications of this universe intelligence optimization? That's a really good question, Webb admitted cheerfully. Our models suggest that the enhancement zone will continue expanding until it reaches some kind of equilibrium state. The universe will essentially become the best possible version of itself, while remaining comprehensible to the life forms that inhabit it. And how long will that take? Ambassador Kethvar asked. Well, at current expansion rates, the entire galaxy should be optimized within approximately 18 months. Give or take a few weeks, depending on how reality feels about specific sectors. The council chamber erupted in overlapping conversations as species after species tried to comprehend the implications. The Hegemony Defense Fleet began calculating military implications of a universe where physics automatically optimized for peace and efficiency. The Synthesis Protocol coordinators started planning resource distribution for civilizations that might develop post-scarcity economics overnight. The Cosmic Tribunal's representatives began drafting legal frameworks for a reality where traditional concepts of limitation and impossibility were becoming obsolete. But amidst the chaos, a new voice joined the conversation. It belonged to the architect collective, whose species had spent millions of years designing and building cosmic-scale structures. Their spokesperson, a being whose form existed primarily as living mathematics, addressed the assembly with something that might have been awe. Council members, the architect said, we have been monitoring the structural changes to space-time itself within the enhancement zone. The optimizations are beyond our comprehension. Reality is becoming not just more efficient, but more beautiful. Space-time itself is developing aesthetic properties that our greatest architects could never have conceived. What do you mean by aesthetic properties of space-time? Dr. Thorak Prime asked. Travel through optimized space has become an art form, the architect replied. Ships report that faster-than-light travel now involves experiences of beauty so profound that their crews arrive at destinations feeling spiritually enriched. The very structure of reality has begun to prioritize experiences that promote wonder and understanding. From another part of the galaxy came a report from the Temporal Studies Institute, whose researchers have been monitoring the chronological effects of the bootstrap engine. Council members were detecting interesting developments in the nature of time itself within the enhancement zone. Past, present, and future are becoming more collaborative. Events are beginning to organize themselves for maximum positive impact across all temporal frameworks. Are you saying time travel is becoming possible? Elder Zephyrian asked. We're saying time travel is becoming unnecessary, came the reply. The optimized timeline automatically incorporates the benefits of potential temporal interventions without requiring actual time travel. It's as if history is editing itself to create the best possible outcomes for all involved parties. Dr. Webb's voice carried across the network with the tone of someone watching his science project exceed all expectations in ways that were both thrilling and slightly terrifying. Council members, I think we might want to start considering the possibility that the bootstrap engine hasn't just solved the Xerian crisis. It might have accidentally solved everything. Dr. Webb, Ambassador Kethvar, said carefully, when you say everything, could you be more specific? Well, Webb replied, consulting instruments that were now displaying readouts in languages that included mathematical concepts for cosmic joy and universal fulfillment. Our latest projections suggest that the enhancement zone is automatically solving not just technological and scientific problems, but social, economic, and philosophical problems as well. Reality is optimizing itself for the maximum flourishing of all life forms within it. The communication network fell silent as the representatives of galactic civilization tried to process this information. They were facing the unprecedented situation of a crisis that had not only been solved, but had been solved so thoroughly that it was solving other crises they hadn't even known they had. Commander Vextal finally spoke, his voice carrying the tone of a military officer trying to maintain some semblance of normal operations during a cosmic utopia deployment. So what you're telling us, Dr. Webb, is that in trying to save one star system from collapse, humanity has accidentally created a universe that automatically makes everything better. That's a pretty good summary, Webb agreed. Though I should point out that better is being defined by reality itself, so we can't take credit for the specific improvements. We just convinced the universe that improvement was possible. Reality did all the actual work. As reports continued to pour in from across the enhancement zone, stories of impossible scientific breakthroughs, spontaneous artistic renaissance, and the gradual emergence of post-scarcity civilizations, the Galactic Council found itself facing a problem that no government in galactic history had ever encountered. They were going to have to figure out how to govern a universe that was rapidly becoming too good to need much governing. And it was all because humanity had looked at an impossible problem and decided that the real solution wasn't to solve the problem, but to upgrade reality itself until the problem became irrelevant. The countdown to system collapse had become a countdown to universal transcendence, and they were all just along for the ride. 1 year after Dr. Marcus Webb had activated the Bootstrap Paradox engine, the galaxy had learned to live with perfection, and surprisingly, it turned out to be a lot more complicated than anyone had expected. The Galactic Council's new headquarters existed in a state of architectural impossibility that the Architect Collective had designed during what they called their transcendent phase. The building was simultaneously solid and ethereal, functional and beautiful, serving as both a practical meeting space and a work of art that induced enlightenment in visitors. It had been constructed using principles of physics that technically didn't exist, which had somehow made it more real than buildings that followed conventional engineering. Ambassador Kethvar stood at the great window of the assembly chamber, her 4 eyes taking in a view that encompassed not just the local star system, but several adjacent dimensions that had become visible once reality had upgraded to include better visual processing for sapient beings. The sight still made her nervous, though she'd gradually grown accustomed to living in a universe that prioritized aesthetic experiences alongside practical ones. Behind her, the emergency session of the Galactic Council was addressing what had become known as the Transcendence Administration Crisis. The problem wasn't that the universe had become too good to live in. Quite the opposite. The problem was that it had become so good that nobody could figure out what they were supposed to do with themselves. Order! Order! She called, though the chamber's enhanced acoustics meant that her voice was automatically harmonized to create a sense of calm and focus among the delegates. Even bureaucratic procedures had been optimized. Elder Zephyrian, whose ancient form now showed signs of the rejuvenation effects that occurred spontaneously within enhanced reality, addressed the assembly. Fellow delegates, we gather today to address the ongoing administrative challenges of governing a post-scarcity, post-limitation civilization spanning 47 star systems and counting. The numbers themselves told the story. The enhancement zone continued to expand at a steady rate, bringing universal optimization to new regions every day. 47 star systems had been completely transformed. War had become impossible, not because of laws or treaties, but because enhanced reality automatically resolved conflicts through solutions that satisfied all parties. Disease had been eliminated through spontaneous biological optimization. Resource scarcity had vanished when matter itself became more cooperative and energy began regenerating itself. Dr. Thorak Prime, whose crystalline form now sparkled with patterns of pure mathematical beauty, provided the latest status report. The expansion continues at steady rates. Enhanced Systems report continued improvements in all measurable categories. Happiness indices are approaching theoretical maximums. Scientific advancement has reached rates that our former measuring systems cannot quantify. Artistic achievement has transcended previous concepts of beauty and now routinely induces spiritual experiences in observers. What about the problems? Asked Commander Vextal, whose military organization had been forced to completely redefine its mission when warfare became physically impossible within enhanced space-time. That's just it, Dr. Thorak Prime replied. There aren't any problems. Enhanced reality automatically prevents problems from developing. Crime is impossible because the universe redirects antisocial impulses into creative outlets. Accidents don't happen because causality has been optimized for beneficial outcomes. Even minor inconveniences like bad weather have been eliminated through spontaneous atmospheric cooperation. From a human delegation, Admiral Chun spoke with the tone of someone who had spent a year watching her species adapt to living in paradise and finding it remarkably challenging. That's actually become our biggest issue. Our civilizations were built around solving problems. Now that all problems solve themselves, we're facing an unprecedented crisis of purpose. Dr. Webb, participating via holographic projection from the original Prometheus Rising, which had become a sort of shrine to impossible engineering, nodded enthusiastically. It's fascinating from a sociological perspective. We've accidentally created a universe where the primary challenge facing sapient beings is figuring out what to do when everything always works perfectly. What have the affected populations been doing? Ambassador Kethvar asked. Mostly art, Admiral Chun replied, and science, and philosophy, and exploration of dimensions that didn't exist before reality upgrade. It turns out that when you remove all survival pressures and resource limitations, most species become incredibly creative. The problem is that they're becoming so creative that their art and science are transcending our ability to comprehend them. Reports from across the enhancement zone supported this observation. The Zirian collective had become composers of music that existed in mathematical dimensions, creating symphonies that could be experienced as both sound and living geometry. Human colonies were developing forms of poetry that rewrote local physics to express metaphorical concepts. The Vorthan had begun sculpting with space-time itself, creating artworks that could only be experienced by traveling through them at faster-than-light speeds. Dr. Webb, Elder Zephyrian said, from a technical perspective, are there any limitations to the reality enhancement process? Will it eventually reach an equilibrium state? Well, Webb replied, consulting instruments that displayed information in ways that hurt to look at directly. Our latest model suggests that the enhancement process is fundamentally open-ended. Reality keeps optimizing itself based on the needs and desires of the beings that live in it. As those beings become more sophisticated, reality becomes more sophisticated to match. Are you saying the universe is becoming more intelligent? Asked Dr. Scythen Ka, whose energy form now displayed patterns that suggested she had gained access to entirely new categories of thought. That's actually a really good way to put it, Webb agreed. The bootstrap engine created a feedback loop between consciousness and reality. As consciousness becomes more complex, reality develops new capabilities to support that complexity. As reality becomes more sophisticated, it enables consciousness to reach higher levels of development. It's an infinite improvement cycle. The implications hung in the enhanced air of the chamber. They were facing not just a transformed galaxy, but a continuously transforming galaxy that would keep getting better forever. Ambassador Kethvar looked around the chamber at the representatives of species that had been fundamentally changed by their exposure to enhanced reality. The Nexus delegation now thought in harmonies that their artificial intelligences described as beautiful beyond calculation. The hegemony representatives had developed forms of strategic thinking that treated conflict resolution as an art form. Even her own people had begun experiencing forms of consciousness that their language couldn't adequately describe. What about the unenhanced regions of the galaxy? She asked. How are they responding to the expansion? Commander Vexdal's report carried a note of cosmic irony. That's perhaps our strangest challenge. Most unenhanced civilizations are eager to be included in the next expansion wave. We have waiting lists. Several species have filed formal requests to have their entire sectors optimized ahead of schedule. And the ones who aren't eager, they're becoming increasingly isolated, Admiral Chun replied. It turns out that once you've experienced enhanced reality, it's very difficult to interact with unenhanced systems. The gap in technological and conceptual capability is becoming unbridgeable. Dr. Webb's voice carried a note of scientific fascination mixed with concern. We're essentially watching the galaxy separate into two different categories of existence. Enhanced regions where impossible things are routine, and unenhanced regions that are becoming increasingly limited by comparison. It's like watching evolution happen at a cosmic scale. Zirian Prime Consciousness Auth LYSS joined the discussion, Their collective voice now harmonized across dimensions in ways that made listening to them a transformative experience. Council members, we wish to share our observations from the perspective of beings who have lived within enhanced reality for one full year. We have discovered that transcendence is not a destination, but a process. Every day, we become more than we were the day before. Every day, reality supports new forms of beauty and understanding that we could not have imagined previously. What does that mean for the future? Elder Zephyrian asked. It means, the Zirian consciousness replied, that we are all becoming something unprecedented in the history of the galaxy. We are becoming beings capable of existence within a reality that is limited only by our ability to imagine better possibilities. The chamber fell into contemplative silence as the delegates absorbed this information. They were facing not just a transformed galaxy, but a transforming galaxy that would continue changing in ways they couldn't predict or control. Finally, Ambassador Kethvar spoke. Dr. Webb, I need to ask the fundamental question. Do you have any regrets about what you've unleashed? Webb considered the question seriously, looking out at readouts that showed the continued expansion of enhanced reality across the galaxy. 47 star systems where war was impossible, scarcity was eliminated, and every day brought new forms of beauty and understanding that previous generations could never have conceived. Ambassador, he said finally, a year ago we were facing the extinction of 17 billion Zirions and the possible destabilization of multiple star systems. Today, we're living in a universe that's becoming more wonderful every day, and our biggest problem is figuring out what to do with unlimited possibility. He paused, then smiled with the expression that had become humanity's signature contribution to galactic civilization. The look of someone who had tried to solve a simple problem and accidentally redefined everything. No, he said, no regrets at all. As the council session continued, with delegates discussing the administrative challenges of governing infinite improvement, the enhancement zone continued its steady expansion. New systems joined the growing region of optimized reality every day, their inhabitants discovering what it meant to live in a universe that prioritized flourishing over mere survival. And somewhere in the unenhanced regions of the galaxy, species that had not yet experienced the transformation looked toward the expanding zone of impossible things and wondered what it would be like to live in a reality where the only limit was how much better things could become. The countdown that had begun with the threat of system collapse had become a countdown to universal transcendence. And the galaxy was learning that sometimes the most dangerous thing about humans wasn't their willingness to attempt the impossible. Sometimes the most dangerous thing was their tendency to succeed. The bootstrap paradox engine continued its work, drawing energy from possibilities that shouldn't exist to create realities that couldn't happen, proving day after day that the difference between impossible and inevitable was sometimes just a matter of perspective. And in a universe that was becoming more perfect every day, the only question that remained was what wonders tomorrow might bring that today couldn't even imagine. After all, in a reality where impossible was just another word for not yet attempted, every day brought new definitions of what better could mean. And humanity had taught the universe that better was always possible.